Okay, good. Well, it's lovely to see you all, I have to say. So I'm Leslie Jones and I'm the Director of Postgraduate Research for the school. So I am actually an academic in the school, and I deal with most academic matters to do with research degrees in the School of Medicine. However, we have Amina, Sarah and Joe at the top there, who most of you will have met at least one or two of them, and they deal with most of the administrative matters to do with research degrees. So I'm just going to introduce you briefly to what goes on in the school and what we expect of you and what you can expect of us. And then we've got a series of presentations from the Graduate College, the Biomedical Research Methods and the MRes, Health and Safety, various student support services, and we've got a presentation from a student about the student experience, and then there's time for some questions if you have any at the end. So, welcome to Cardiff. Many of you will have spent some time in Cardiff already, I'm sure, but many of you will be new to Cardiff. So I'd like to welcome you to the medical school here in Cardiff. We don't have a big undergraduate population, so many of you won't have been in this school before. It's great to see you here, and Cardiff itself is a fantastic place actually. So many of you will recognise the Millennium Stadium, where famously they play rugby. It's great going to see matches actually in the Millennium Stadium, but you should learn the Welsh national anthem before you go, because you'll want to join in. However, it's quite expensive, and it's actually much cheaper to go and see the Cardiff Blues, who fortunately have decanted back to the Arms Park, and that's much cheaper. This is their first match this year against Edinburgh, which unfortunately they lost. It was very close. It was quite exciting, at least in the second half. And you can watch the rugby in the afternoon and go and see the opera in the evening. And this is also extremely, you'll never find anywhere cheaper to see really good opera. So I would highly recommend it. I went to see La Bohème earlier this week. It was fantastic. Great tenor. And lots of shopping opportunities. And I'm not going to talk about the nightlife because I don't know anything about it and all your peers will. And you can get out of Cardiff very readily into the beacons, so there's plenty of outdoor opportunities for those that like. This is my favourite view of Pen y Fan here. You can see the clouds just beginning to come down at the top, so you're standing here on the edge of the Caerlevan Ridge thinking, am I going to get there before it rains, and while I can still see something? So this is the programme for today. I'm very pleased to say that Terry Delahunty is here to talk about the Graduate College, and so you'll get a few different talks today. So as I say, I'm the Director of Postgraduate Research for the School of Medicine. And these are my contact details. It's much better to email me. I'm much more likely to respond. And I thought I'd try to set that in context by giving you an idea of the school structure. So Paul Morgan is the Dean of the Medical School. So effectively, he's our Chief Executive. And he also is an active researcher. And the school is run by Paul and his executive board. So the directors of our research institutes, the school manager, and also the NHS Director of Research and Development, because clearly the NHS is very important to what we do. And so the institutes in red are the research institutes, and nearly all of you will be actually associated with one of these institutes. So my institute is psychological medicine and neuroscience, but you can see that we cover a wide range of different topics. And then we have a couple of other institutes. We have medical education, and they deal with the undergraduate medical curriculum and postgraduate taught courses. And we have this institute which is about translation, innovation, methodologies and engagement, and they actually deal with the main reason that you're likely to come into contact with them is that they provide a lot of big facilities. So they provide infrastructure and equipment that individual groups are unlikely to have themselves. So big, expensive stuff. And they run Central Biotechnology Services. And I think Ian Bruce is going to come and talk to us a little bit later about what Central Biotechnology Services can offer. So Paul, who couldn't come along to welcome you himself this morning, unfortunately, because he's not in Cardiff, is the Dean. And the way that PGR works is that I answer directly to the Dean. So he delegates his responsibility for all students in the school. He delegates that responsibility for research students to me. So I'm your first port of call, I guess. And below this here, serving the administrative functions, is the Research Degrees Office. And the academic functions are served by the Research Degrees Committee, which I shall talk about, which is a committee of academics. So the Research Degrees Office is very important because they actually sort out most of the administrative issues to do with studentships. So Amina is actually the manager of the office. Sarah, who many of you will have corresponded with, deals with most of the information to do with applications and admissions. Frances deals with monitoring and appraisal, which I shall talk about as I go on. And Joanne, for those of you doing the MRes, Jo is the MRes administrative support. And I think that Fran wasn't here this morning, but many of you will meet Fran. So our aim is to help you to get your PhD or your MD or your MRes or whatever other degree you're sitting for. And for PhDs, within 3 years, most of you will recognise that this is a counsel of perfection, and many people don't get their degree entirely within the 3 years, but our aim is to get you to get that degree as soon as possible afterwards. We'd also like you to have a great time while you're doing it and to do some really good science, and there's some great science going on here at the school. And I hope that most of you will get to join in with that. And you'll get to hear about other people's science because we have lots of seminar series. There's the science seminar series, but there are also individual seminar series in the different institutes. And you should try to go to what interests you. And it's a good idea to get into the regular habit of going to seminar series, because outside speakers in particular may give you ideas about things that you could use in your work. And you often get a chance to talk to them if they're doing something that interests you. They're not too scary, most of them. You can easily go up and talk to them after their lecture. So we also try to implement national and university guidelines and to meet the standards that are set out for PhDs. And we kind of do that in the background, so you won't hear much about this, but nevertheless, we're making sure that the degree you get is comparable with degrees elsewhere in the country. So when do we help? Well, clearly on the way in, and most of you will have experienced this in your application procedure. We also can help during the PhD program. I have to say that most of you I will never see personally. You'll come in, you'll have a fine time, you'll do some good work, and we'll say congratulations at the end, and you won't ever come to see me individually. There are a small proportion of students, probably 10 to 15%, who I will inevitably end up seeing a bit more of, particularly if they have problems. And we also help at the end in completing the PhD program. So we provide, along with the Graduate College, a number of different, I guess, methods for helping you to actually finish off that PhD. So it works for PhDs in 3 years. So you register. In the first year, for most of you, there is a taught course, the Diploma in Biomedical Methods. You can convert this with more assessment into a postgraduate certificate, which is worth 60 credits. It's the first year we've offered this, so it's Bob who's going to talk to you next. We'll talk a little bit about, who's going to talk to you after Terry. We'll tell you a little bit about this and what the options are. You can be exempted from the biomedical methods course, particularly if you have a relevant master's or suitable previous experience, or actually if your PhD is really in an area that doesn't fit our particular training that we offer, because it's a fairly generic course. And it may be that your training needs are rather different, and what we would ask in that case is that the training needs are identified with the supervisor and we get told what sort of training you are doing. There's also plenty of training available throughout your PhD in specific areas, mainly offered through the graduate school, although we do offer some here as well. So you continue your research clearly through all 3 years, completing it in year 3 and writing it up. And throughout this time, you're actually appraised. The most rigorous appraisal is at the first year, where you will write a short report and you will get appraised by a committee of 3 academics who are not part of your supervisory team. I think I've got, yeah. So there is a 6-monthly assessment, which is basically a tick box form. There's monthly monitoring, which doesn't really need to concern you, except that if you don't turn up and your supervisor hasn't seen you, they will eventually tell us, because we get them to fill in a monthly monitoring email just to indicate that they have seen you and that you are keeping in contact and they are keeping in contact. The first year appraisal consists of a 2,000-word report along with a timetable for the remainder of the research and a reformulated research plan, along with an outline of the thesis, including the aims, the hypothesis, and the rough content that you're likely to be putting in that thesis. There's an appraisal with a panel of 3 academics, principal investigators. And the outcomes are yes, maybe, and no. So most of our students, probably about 70%, get a straight yes, go straight on. That's fine, everything's fine. About 30% will get a maybe. We very seldom say no. We nearly always say maybe, but you need to do some extra things. And sometimes those extra things are just because it's not clear to us that all the resources are in place, or that something hasn't been validated. It's often quite small things, but sometimes it can be rather larger things, and sometimes there are issues that need to be sorted out with supervisory teams as well. You also get the point, you also get the time to talk to that academic panel about any issues that you may have with your project or your supervision, entirely independently. And we also ask supervisors to appoint mentors for their students. Now, the mentors that get appointed are likely to be academics who aren't related to the project necessarily, and they may not know very much about the science in that area. That's not really the point of having a mentor necessarily. A mentor is someone who you can go and talk to about any issues that you may have, scientific or non-scientific, and all of the academics in the school are scientists one way or another, so they'll all have a view on how the research is progressing. Actually, I think it's better to have a mentor who isn't directly in your research area. And although you get a mentor appointed at the beginning with luck, and you should ask if you don't get one, in fact, you may want to find your own mentoring relationships as you become more experienced and get to know more people. You may find people with whom you find it very easy to discuss your science, and they may be your peers, or they may be other members of the academic staff, or they may be other members of your research group. And we feed all this information back to you and your supervisors, and if there are problems, we feed it back through to the directors of the institutes as well, so that they can help to deal with any logistical problems that have arisen. So the school's institutes each have appointed a postgraduate research representative, and the postgraduate research representative sits on the Research Degrees Committee, which I chair, so that we have a school-wide view on the way research degrees are working and things that we could do to improve them. That also has student representation. And you can see that these are the names of the academics who are actually the PGR leads in each institute with their email addresses. And the slide presentations will be available online, and actually the whole thing will be available as a video at the end. So these are probably actually your first point of contact for PGR problems. And the institutes also have administrative contacts, and these are also given here. So your responsibilities are to turn up, to take or fill in an exemption form for the biomedical research courses. We expect you to attend a science seminar series. If the science seminars aren't suitable, then please feel free to attend other seminar series. But as I say, it's important to go. You're likely to get the opportunity to present your work in your department or your institute, or indeed many of you outside, though often this doesn't happen in year one. And it's your responsibility to provide the documentation that we need to appraise you and to turn up to your appraisal. Sometimes things do go wrong, or you just want to talk, or you need some advice. So you can speak to your friends and colleagues, and that's always a good place to start. You could try speaking to your supervisor and co-supervisor. They can often help. But they can only help if they know you've got a problem, so you do need to tell them about it. You can speak to your mentor. You can speak to your head of department or institute. Sorry, this is what the institutes were called before, and I haven't updated it. You can speak to Amina in the PGR office. You can speak to your research degrees committee member, your institute PGR representative, and you can speak to me. So what you choose to do will depend a little bit on the nature of the problem, but basically I would say that anything administrative should go to the PGR office first, and anything academic should probably come to your PGR rep and to me. If you've got this far, things have gone badly wrong. So this is the Research Degrees Committee, and this is really just for information, and you'll see that we've got the student representation here, and I think that one of the students on the current student committee will come and talk a little bit later. So there's a couple of really good articles which I always recommend, written by an American academic about how to succeed in science. And they're very entertaining, they're very short, and I highly recommend that you read them. They're available online. And interestingly, Jonathan Udall, who wrote them, is actually giving a scientific seminar here next Wednesday, I think. But next Thursday lunchtime from 1 to 2 in the seminar room in the Henry Wellcome building, he's actually going to give a talk about how to succeed in science. And you'd all be very welcome to go along. And if his articles are anything to go by, they're likely to be very entertaining. He talks a bit about things like, how to deal with your supervisor. So, my final word is good luck. But remember that Louis Pasteur said, fortune favours the prepared mind. You'll see that translated in a number of different ways. And this is attributed to Thomas Jefferson, though I don't know whether he really said it. I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it. And I have certainly found that in my own case. You'll only see what you know about. So if you get a batch of results and you can't interpret them, you might be able to interpret them if you read more widely, is kind of the bottom line there. Okay, so I think that's all I've got to say, and there'll be time for questions at the end. And now I'd like to introduce Terry Delahunty from the Graduate Centre downtown.